Other conspiracies surrounding the moon landing are about health issues and safety concerns for the astronauts. One part of space close to our Earth is the Van Allen radiation belt. This is between the Earth and the moon. It is closer towards the moon. It isn't so close to the Earth where the space station, satellites that circulate the Earth, things like that, they don't go far enough into space to reach this radiation belt, but it does need to be passed through to get to the moon. So one common concern that people had was, how are the astronauts going to survive this extent of radiation exposure? The spaceship would have needed about 6 feet of lead surrounding the spacecraft just to make it through that extent of radiation, and all it was like some aluminum. One of my sources, Brian O'Leary, did believe that it was impossible for them to reach the moon due to the safety concern. Someone who believed that the moon landing was impossible was Thomas Barron. He had a case. He didn't believe that Apollo 11 was going to make it to the moon. He did safety inspections for the Apollo 11 aircraft, and he wrote a 500-page report about how it was unsafe, it wasn't built correctly, and it was never going to make it to the moon. It was going to be a danger to the astronauts on the mission. So he did go to trial with NASA, and his 500-page report was lost, and it was never found. 1 week after his hearing, him and his wife and his son were in a car accident, and they died. And they were hit by a train, and they died.
I'm going to paraphrase an excerpt from the book Chariots for Apollo, A History of Manned Lunar Spacecraft. And basically it reads that Barron was an inspector, and he found some problems with the spacecraft due to some lack of communication and just a poor assignment of jobs on NASA's part. And basically he made all these observations, he collected all this gossip and rumors and comments from employees. And then he wrote notes, but he never really filed anything. He didn't document any of these problems. Instead, he just went straight to people, and then he purposely leaked stuff to the press. And then everything was kind of blown out of proportion. It could have been handled better.
It's no
but
secret
it doesn't mean
that NASA killed him because he knew what was wrong with the Apollo 11 mission. He knew.
He died in a car-train crash. NASA, I thought they primarily dealt with aircrafts. I didn't know that they also had trains.
It was the government. They are involved with everything.
So you said all of your conspiracies. I have some stuff that kind of is it was real. So within the Apollo missions, 250,000 people, 250,000, were involved with the project and worked on that project. And there's no way that many people could keep this whole secret that, oh my gosh, the moon landing isn't real. It's actually in Hollywood, filmed in Area 51 or something.
Okay, but the thing is, what if it was a need-to-know basis, and since everyone worked in a different department, they didn't know the whole story, so then only a few people knew the whole picture, so then only those people could see that it was hoax.
Another thing was in the Apollo 15 mission in 1971, they took a picture of the landscape. And then later, Japan sent a satellite to the moon to take pictures. This was in the early 2000s, and it was called Selene. And the pictures from Selene and the Apollo 15 mission, they were over 30 years apart. The pictures were exactly the same. The landscapes look exactly the same in both pictures. Another thing, though, is why would NASA spend so much money, billions of dollars, on 5 Apollo missions after they got people to believe that they went to the moon? If it was a hoax that they got people to believe that they went to the moon on the first one, why would they spend all this money on funding 4 more to get people on the moon?
Why not?
Because they could be putting it towards actually going to the moon if the first one was a hoax. Like, why would they...
Oh, so what you're saying is why would they do it again and again and again?
Yeah, why would they fake the moon landing like 5 times?
Why wouldn't you? Do you want people, like, don't... That's, like, impressive. Well, I mean, if we can continue to go back to the moon, who do you think's going to want to mess with us? No one.
Yeah, but apparently...
The United States are better than everyone else.
But according to your argument, we've never been to the moon before.
Exactly, we've never
so
been.
why wouldn't we put all those funds that we used into faking those 4 other moon landings into actually trying to go to the moon?
Maybe they did, but since they were just kept being flops, they just had to keep making movies about it.
And then also, other countries dedicated just as much time and money to the lunar missions. And if it's as impossible as you say it is, and if you can never get to the moon through this lunar belt, why would they continue this impossible mission of landing through something that's impossible?
Because they wanted to be better than us?
But you said it's impossible, so why would all of the countries in the world...
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's highly unlikely. So maybe they wanted to try, but in the end, they just couldn't figure it out.
So there's people that say the moon landing is fake, okay? Why aren't these other countries, like, we were in the middle of this space race with Russia, and all of these other countries were, like, the Cold War was across 2 continents, so, like, other countries were, like, there, and no one ever was like, that's not real, like, it's not real. Like, all these other countries who are just as knowledgeable in the field of astrology and physics and astrophysics and whatever, they were never like, America's faking it, it's not real.
They weren't part of the space race. They weren't part of the Cold War, so they just didn't, they like wanted to stay out of it and not get involved.
Yeah, but Russia was involved in the Cold War, and they probably put their best experts and whatever, who got Sputnik into space, so they obviously know what they're doing. They didn't say that it was fake. They couldn't...
Or did they?
Yeah, but they couldn't prove anything. They couldn't... Like, everything that they found was like, oh my gosh, this actually happened. Like, they successfully completed the moon landing.
But how would they actually know? Because they didn't see them on the
Well,
moon.
a lot of the missions were tracked by radar from several different countries to the moon and back, including the Soviet Union, and everything checked out. They're like, okay, there's this rocket going to the moon, and it's coming back, and all the radars were like, okay, they made it. One specific instance where with like the radiology and everything was Larry Basinger, a technician for WHAS radio in Louisville, Kentucky. He was just like doing his own thing, and then he detected and recorded transmissions from the Apollo 11 astronauts on the moon to and the lunar module. Like, it was between like them on the moon and NASA. They're just like radio transmissions because like it's right on radio waves, and he picked those up and he recorded them. NASA put $25.4 billion into the Apollo 11 mission and program and research and whatever. So why would they launch this $25.4 billion rocket if it wasn't actually like going to the moon?
They needed people to believe that we were going to get there, because that's what people saw. Us landing on the moon as us beating Russia in the Cold War. They saw that as like the final like end point of the space race. And so after Kennedy promised that we would get to the moon, the government was willing to do anything they had to do.
The space race, us winning the space race, didn't end the Cold War. The Cold War didn't end until over 20 years later. Like, this was in 1960s. It didn't end until 1989.
But at that point, like, that's how America viewed it. Like, they thought that us getting to the moon, that was the answer. They thought that was...
Why wouldn't they just put the $25.4 billion into the Cold War? And why?
It wasn't a war fought with soldiers.
Yeah, it was with nuclear weapons.
They thought that going to the moon was going to put them ahead. And, I mean, it kind of was a turning point when they were like, we're better at space than you. Like, we got to the moon. Like,
so I went to try and do like further research on like the school databases and whatever, and everything that I found, like, nothing recognized, like, the moon landing conspiracy, like, they didn't recognize anything of a hoax. It was just, like, strict information about the moon landing, but there was nothing about, like, hoaxes. And
Because the database is run by the government, and the government doesn't want you to think that it was a hoax.
But aren't there, like, some private organizations that just have databases?
Yeah, but I bet you they're paid off by the government to make sure that nobody can find information on it being a hoax. So, either you believe that the moon landing was fake and it was filmed in Hollywood,
Or you believe that it actually happened and that we've made it to the moon 5 times.
it's up to you to decide what you think is real.
But obviously the moon landing is
It
real.
was fake. No. You're done.